This is the Pot of Gold podcast, where we talk about finances, wealth generation, and real estate investing. Today on the show, we have Dan Grove, who is actually a medical professional who turned to real estate investing to find independence amid the frustrations of being overtaken by corporate healthcare. I guess he's also got some specialization in pulmonary, which has to do with the lungs, for those of you who aren't versed in medical terminology. And he's been part of the coaching course that I recently joined with Jesse Stanton called the Growth Co. How are you doing today, Dan?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Definitely glad to have you here on the show. So part of what we do here on the show is we kind of get an idea of what people are doing to drive their businesses forward and be successful, because myself, I come from a blue collar field as a W-2 employee for probably the last 20 years or so of my life, because I started working early when I was around 15 years old. And I'm just trying to help people along the way as they try to learn how to kind of escape that frame for how they earn money in order to start their own businesses and be successful. So I would love to be able to ask you to start. How did you get started doing all this? Why did you decide to leave healthcare and start looking into real estate?
Well, actually, I haven't left healthcare yet. I
Okay.
wanted to be a doctor since I was 6 years old, and I still want to be a doctor. And because I love practice medicine was one of the reasons I started looking into something else as a side. So I was taken over by a big corporate health system, which pretty much is taking over every medical practice in the country. I think it's really hard to find nowadays people who are not, employed by a health system, and especially someone like me. So I do pulmonary medicine, but I also do intensive care medicine. So I have to work in a hospital.
Gotcha.
That's my specialty, is hospital based. So I was part of a practice. We were taken over by the big health system, and it's a fine health system. There's nothing wrong with it, but just the fact that we could be taken over, and then, now instead of being in part of the physicians that run the practice, we were now, layers beneath the corporate sort of bureaucracy hierarchy that, the people at the top that made the decisions, I didn't have any interaction with. And they weren't necessarily thinking primarily about me and my partners and our patients.
You're not self-directed. You don't get to make your own executive decisions, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And so, if you're in a job, you had said if you work in like manufacturing or something like that, and middle management is giving you a hard time, it's annoying and it really affects your quality of life. But when that happens for me, people could die.
That's true. Yeah.
And so, I've had some experiences where people couldn't get through to us in our office after the transition, and we had people who ended up getting hospitalized because we didn't have, it wasn't set up correctly. And so, so it became something where I wanted to find a way to have a second source of income just in case. That was one motivation. The second motivation was I have 5 children, and I wanted something that I could build for them, meaning maybe as a legacy, as like they say generational wealth. Although I don't like the idea of giving my kids all the money, because I want them to have the experience and the pride and the sense of self that comes from building their own future, but to be able to help them along, or be able to give them exposure to a potential career that they can build. And I'm their dad. I'm going to help them, right? But then to find that if you can generate wealth, you can have a much larger impact on your community, on society. And so I wanted to have the ability to sort of follow I get a lot of big ideas of stuff I want to do, and I want to be able to do those things without having to worry about how I'm going to make it happen.
No, I understand that completely. No, it's I got a 2-year-old son myself, and I don't want to do everything for him, because I also understand that struggle is the thing that gives you the ability to do again. I guess it's like muscles, right? If you don't use them at all, they deteriorate and they start to shrink until they don't have any utility at all. But if you work them, then they build up their strength. And I think that's the same for anything that we have to do in our lives. It's just the nature of reality.
Yeah, stick with the metaphor. I'm going to take my kids to the gym. I want to have a membership at the gym, show them how to use the equipment, and maybe spot them on the machines and stuff like that, but still give them the opportunity to do it for themselves.
Well, exactly. And taking them to the gym's a cool thing, because as much as you want them to be healthy, you can't lift the weights for them. You can't eat nutrition, or you can't have good nutrition and eat healthy for them. They have to make the decision and do it themselves.
For sure.
I like that. Yeah. But we still want what's best for them. And so we try to make it easy where we can. It's kind of an odd balance of being a parent, knowing that you can't do everything for them, even if you want to.
yeah, I know. It's actually bad. Like I there's this, everybody's heard of the term a helicopter parent, but a bigger problem now is what they call the snowplow parents, right? So for me, I grew up in Arizona. That was like a weird thing. But for you in Utah, I'm sure you understand. The idea is that parents that just completely plow the path so that the kids have no obstacles. Everything is kind of laid out for them. And then when they actually get out on their own, right, they are ill prepared to deal with the setbacks and to, all the stuff that like adulting brings with it, and so so that you might be, I think it's doing a disservice sometimes. But
yeah, well, it's interesting that that's the case, because my understanding of Buddha was that his father did that kind of a thing to him. He kind of kept him in this like perfect place. All the people that served him were beautiful people that were never sick. And then he managed to get off the ground one day, and he came across a cripple, and it shattered his worldview.
Right.
And like the whole religion kind of sprouted from the fact that he realized that there was also negativity in the world, and that he wanted to do something about it. And it's just interesting that that's the exact kind of mentality that these snowplow parents that you're calling would have had. I don't know. It's interesting. But I think that also ties into entrepreneurship, kind of talking about real estate investing and things, because we'd like to be able to go out and have success and just have it, right? But it's going to require us going out there and making mistakes and having some failures in order to build up the stamina or the resiliency that we need to be successful. Because
and also the experience, like the experience of failure is failure is the world's greatest teacher.
Yeah, nothing better than the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Well, let's go into that a little bit. I know you said that you kind of started into real estate investing to kind of have a side hustle that kind of support things in case things don't go exactly the way you want with the medical career. What has your real estate investing journey looked like?
So I started acquiring, I took a home equity loan on my house, and I had some money saved, and I started acquiring houses initially in the sort of the traditional investing way. But then I joined a mentorship. I got training from someone named Pace Morby. It was called Subject 2, the Sub 2 mentorship, learning about creative finance. So I started learning how to, buy houses with seller financing or Subject 2, all these things, which just whatever, Google Pace Morby, you'll find anything you need to know. And so then I started, building up that way. And then I kind of ran out of my own money. I didn't have any money left to buy more houses. So now I'm trying to connect with investors where I can find the house, and then they can have the capital and we can own the house together. Okay. Or they could just lend me the money to help with the initial investment.
So what would that look like if someone wanted to collaborate with you in that regard?
Okay, so I can just tell you what. So we have one. There's 2 houses right now that are under contract that, if everything goes well, God willing, we will close next week. So the first one is a house in Denver. So what we do is we find the houses. We find the houses from people who are other investors, or from agents, or from people who do wholesaling, people who get houses under contract and then sell that contract. And then we will then find, we will do all the vetting of the deal, all the underwriting, checking it out. So this house in Denver is going to be a co-living house. It's a big house, so we'll be able to hopefully put 7 rooms in it. So I had it checked out by contractors and by property managers and all that, and it checked out, and we got under contract. And then I found an investor that's a single mom who she wants to invest in something that can build equity over time. So she's going to actually give the money to get the house sort of purchased, and we're going to own it 50-50.
Okay.
And so she's
So,
going to be the investor, and then together we'll own the house. And then
so
the second,
you're going to find the deal that'll meet the parameters. She'll bring the capital. You go in 50-50, and then when the equity appreciates, you'll get to split that appreciation 50-50.
Yeah, and we'll take care of all the details, like setting up and monitoring property management, the accounts, the LLCs, the insurance, all that stuff. We'll take care of, I'll take care of all that. And then all she has to do is just give me a bank account to deposit the money, and we'll check in with her. And then when it's time to sell, when she wants out or whatever, we just have to come up with a plan. Either we'll sell the house if she wants to get out, or we will get a refinance, and I'll pay her whatever the appraised equity, her portion of the appraised equity. The other house is one in Baltimore, where it's a co-living house we got from a wholesaler. This one we're going to rent by the room, and it's going to have 6 bedrooms. But this one I'm getting somebody just to loan me the money. So he's going to loan me the amount of money I need to get into the property. So that includes all the entry costs. So there are, a number of things that are necessary to buy a house when you're using creative finance. So you need to usually give some money to the seller. There's usually like a down payment. Sometimes there's arrears, meaning if the person has fallen behind in their mortgage payments. That wasn't the case here. You need to give money to the wholesaler, commissions to the agents. There's acquisition fees. There's closing costs, transaction coordination fees, repairs, and holding costs. So those are all the parts of an entry fee. So that's the money that you need to acquire the property. So that amount of money somebody's going to lend me, and I'm going to pay them a monthly rate that I'm going to take from the rental income. And so that's going to be that one. And so hopefully these will come through, and then they'll start, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find property management. This one we're going to use with a website called PadSplit, and then kind of manage it through there. Hopefully the property managers do the work, but sometimes you gotta manage the managers a little bit.
Yep.
So finding a good property manager is part of the experience, part of the failures.
Yep. Sometimes you get a lemon, and you're going to have to switch them out and eat some processed in the interim.
For sure.
I'm just going to go ahead and explain co-living a little bit. I'm not sure if everyone who's listening is going to understand what that is.
Oh, yeah,
basically, what you'll do is you'll take a single family home and you'll put more rooms into it so that you can rent it out by the room. And then you're going to be able to generate a little bit more cash flow every month because you're charging less per room. But because there's more rooms, you end up generating more cash flow overall. And PadSplit is a co-living company that helps investors set that up and then manage it.
Yeah, for me, co-living is actually it's more than just the higher revenue. For me, co-living is a means where I can use investing to help solve the problems of affordable housing. Right. The problems of affordable housing is rent rates have gone way up, and many people who are low income are getting priced out of the rental market, and it's causing a lot of problems. And so it's really a problem of supply. There's just not enough houses, right? And I think a lot of government institutions are trying to solve the problem of affordable housing, and they're doing just about everything you could think of except for building more houses. So how do you solve this problem of supply? Is there's a whole lot of people who can afford a room, right, but can't afford a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment. And these are single people that they don't need an apartment. They just, the room is fine with the shared common space of like the kitchen and the living room. And there's also a lot of people that have sort of transient work experiences. If they're in construction, if they're living someplace for 6 months because of a job, maybe they're part of whatever, Verizon's laying fiber optic cables and they're going to be working there for 6 months. So they don't want to sign a lease for a whole year.
Gotcha.
There's a huge population of people that they are sort of under supplied in the housing market. They can't get a house, and it's a problem. And so co-living creates an opportunity where they can actually have a nice, clean, safe place to live that they can afford, and it helps prevent homelessness, and it prevents people from having to have huge long commutes, right? A lot of people, they spend 2 hours on various public transportation because the houses the apartments they can afford are so far away from where they work. And so this allows them to be closer to work. It allows them to have affordable housing. And so it provides a tremendous service and fills a major gap in the housing market that needs to be filled.
Well, I like that because I went through a similar experience. When I first got married to my wife, we had a little 300 square foot studio apartment that we lived in. And the buildings were tagged constantly outside where we were at. We were pretty sure that there was sketchy things going off on the street corner. And I was worried about having my new bride in that little area, but that's what we could afford at the time.
Right.
And I was also commuting about an hour and a half down to Salt Lake because that's where we were able to afford, and that's where I could find work. So, I definitely understand where they're coming from. If that's the problem's fixing, that's really cool.
So that helps everyone else, because if you have all these folks that maybe a family wouldn't work in a co-living, but by taking a bunch of people who now you've decreased the demand for the studio apartments. And so the demand goes down for the studio apartments because those folks are able to rent by the room, and then that brings the rental prices down on the rest of the housing.
Yeah, I like that. It's really cool model. And I think that entrepreneurs and business people in general are problem solving oriented. That's what they're trying to do, is solve problems. And then they're like, okay, let's earn money by solving those problems. But I think that ultimately is what it boils down to, is how do we solve these problems? And I don't know, money provides a good motivator for people to do that.
Yeah, in our society, it's the major motivator, the way we have it set up. You're going to be hard pressed to have a successful solution to a major problem that doesn't, in some way, if you can have the solution make somebody money, it's just going to be infinitely more successful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can legislate things and you can force things, and that works sometimes and a lot of times. But if you can find a way to have it be self-perpetuating through a internal motivation, then I think it's probably more successful, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned Pace Morby. One of the things he likes to say is, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And so to get people to work for no pay, well, it's probably not going to work because people need a reason.
Communism didn't work. It's been tried a few times now. It's been, what are we, like 0 for 3, right? I guess, Vietnam, I don't know.
Well, those are the major ones, right?
We're 0 for history on communism and socialism. So, maybe some people thought it was a good idea, and I get it. Like, imagine all the people living in peace. I think that's a wonderful idea, to have everybody live together and there be no poverty and no war. That's great. And when we enter that utopia, we can deal with that. But as of now, human beings are motivated and motivated by self-gain, and so any system that's going to be successful is going to have to work within that reality.
Yeah, and I think designing it in a way that it's a win-win for both parties, whether it's through making money for both sides or through gaining some kind of an asset or some kind of benefit on one side and money on the other, it's really the optimal way to do it, because then everybody walks away happy. And well, that's really cool. I know that you've got a couple of properties already, and you're hoping to get closed on these ones. What are kind of some of the stumbling blocks or failures that you've experienced that maybe you've learned lessons from that we can maybe pass on to the audience?
Well, so there've been a bunch. Okay, so I could talk about my worst houses. I have one that I got in near Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is a nice little town. It's near the University of Alabama. But I did a terrible job comping this house, and I didn't consult with property managers to determine the rent rates. And so what I did was I just went on the online calculators like Rentometer and Zillow Rents, and so when I went on those programs, it gave me a certain rent number. But then I got the house. The other thing I learned is that I was working a night shift, and never agree to a house when you're at 3 o'clock in the morning. on a night shift. That's just general, no night shift decisions. So I did. Then when I called a property manager, he's like, oh yeah, that might be the case, but this house, like where it is, in relation to the university and in town, this is not a place where people want to rent. This is where they want to buy, but it's not really in good enough shape to sell. It's not in bad shape. It just needed to be updated to compete. And so I didn't do a good job comping, and I didn't do a good job getting my rent rates. And so now I'm going to be losing money on this house. The good news is as a buy and hold investor, time heals all mistakes. And so eventually, if I can stick with it, I can hold it enough that it appreciates enough, I will make up for my losses and then still make money, but it's going to take a while. So the two things I learned from that is, one is always triple check your comping. Two is from that point on, I do not, I use the online calculators to evaluate rent rates as a starting point. But before I will sign a contract, I will call property management companies and property managers, and I will ask them, what did this house rent for? And I'll try to get 2 or 3 opinions to see what it actually will rent for and use that in the underwriting. I'll give you an example. I was looking at a house that penciled in, all the numbers look good. It was in Florida. And I was like, oh, this is going to work. I almost was like, let's just do it. But then I was like, wait a second. I'm calling the property management company. And I think it said it rent for like $2,900 a month, which would be like a $400 a month net spread. But I called the property manager and I spoke to him. He's like, yeah, that house would rent for $2,400 a month.
Okay, so there's all
your $500 a month different. Like, what happened? So he told me what had happened is now Rentometer goes back 12 months. 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a big hurricane. Okay. And everybody moved out of their house and rented while they were having their own house fixed.
Okay. So there was a huge surge in demand.
That jacked up the rent rates. Mm-hmm. Now, all those people then, their houses were fixed, they moved back, and the rent rates went way down. And so had I not called him, right, and double checked that, it could have been a big mistake. So that was and that's sort of the learning process for that. That was a huge thing. So now, like, I always use experts. I always double check, get local contractors, local handymen, local property managers to tell me what are these numbers. If you want to call a realtor and say, hey, what do you think this is worth? And so that you don't run into those problems. The online calculators are great, but you have to, it maybe as like a general starting term. Like my rule is, if it doesn't work with the online ones, it ain't going to work. But if it does just because it does work on the online calculators, what they give you, doesn't mean that those will work.
Well, and I really like that tip, because you wouldn't know looking at Rentometer that people had all started renting because of a hurricane to get their houses fixed, and then had all moved back into their homes afterwards. It's like, that's not sophisticated enough of a tool to be able to tell you something like that.
Right. And listen, I live in Baltimore, and this house I'm getting in Baltimore, I didn't trust. I drove by it and I still didn't trust. I called 3 investors, right? And I asked them, do you have houses near here? What's been your experience? How much are you renting it for? Right. Mm-hmm. Because especially in older cities, things can change a few blocks, big time. And Rentometer is not going to get that kind of nuance.
That's right? True. There's a historical district here in the town that I live in that actually has it's like renovation and construction restrictions. So if you buy a house in the historical district, you can't make changes to it in a way that would compromise its historical aesthetic. Right. And so that can really throw a wrench in your plans if you're planning on renting out that house, right? And modernizing it.
Right.
Very cool. I like those things. How about on the side of successes or things that went really well for you? Do you have anything that you could share with that?
Yeah. So listen, my first 2 houses have been successful. They were successful BRRRR properties. So I was able to buy them and get somebody to rent them out. And then I refinanced out and essentially don't have any of my initial investment left in it. So in some way you could look at it as they're like free houses.
Okay.
So,
and you said BRRRR, that's the bigger.
That's for buy, buy, rehab. Was it buy, rehab, refinance? No,
Rent.
buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. I get
Yep.
the
There
R's
you go.
out of order sometimes, but
Well, it's all ours. So
yeah,
as long as you get them all in there.
yeah. So I got a good one in Florida that I resold as a wrap, and I was fortunate with a house in Baltimore that's renting pretty well.
Okay, very cool. I like
So,
that.
but my whole goal is long term, right? I'm blessed that I don't want to quit my W-2. I love my job, but I'm hoping to build something so that I have the flexibility in 5 to 10 years. And so for me, that's all about sort of a slow build, you know.
Yeah, it's a good to look ahead at things like that as well. I'm hoping to do something similar as I build my own rental portfolio. I'm not sure what kind of size we're looking at yet, but it's interesting. The things that I've learned just trying to build a business and be an entrepreneur with real estate have really increased my financial literacy and understanding of how money works and how you can shift things around and use them to make things happen. And instead of working every hour for the hourly paycheck, have things
Right,
grow because I'm sowing seeds.
right,
And
exactly.
that's been a really cool thing to witness as I've been exploring this space.
Or even
Now,
better, learn how to invest in a farm and let the farmer sow the
yeah,
seed.
yeah. Well, there's definitely levels to all of this, right? You got to
Yeah.
start somewhere. But maybe the sky's the limit. Maybe I can eventually build houses on Mars or something, when Musk populates on Mars out there. I'll probably be around by then or still. But yeah, very cool. So the tentative plan is to have something that's pretty stable in about 5 to 10 years. Are you looking to expand your rental portfolio to a specific number, or what's the plans for the future look like?
So I've hired somebody who's going to help me set up systems so that we can maximize our deal flow so that we can get the most deals, because we want to have the ratio of good deals to bad deals is pretty low. So if 1 out of 100 of the deals that we get is good, or 1 out of 200, that means I want to get 200 to 300 or 400, in, so that you can find those 1 or 2 that really work. And then it's going to be a matter of then building up relationships with lenders, right?
Okay.
So I'm trying to, that's sort of the that's sort of the hand. So then the limit is just a matter of how many of those can I find.
Gotcha. It's kind of separating the wheat from the chaff.
And then finding the funders, because I don't have
Raising capital is the second
I
side.
don't have an infinite flow of money. If I did, I wouldn't need to do this, right?
Nope. That makes perfect sense to me. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of the people that tune into the show are in the same boat as well. But that's why we're doing this, is we're trying to help people figure out how to do things by experiencing it ourselves, and then just kind of passing the torch along behind it.
Sure.
But I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's a pleasure talking to you. Where can people contact you to be able to either bring you deals that they might have, or possibly invest in the properties that you're purchasing?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook and Instagram. So Facebook, I'm on dan.grove.md.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I'm Dan_Grove1. And those, and also I have a website for potential investors. The website's called Grove Family Investments. That's what's up there. That has the link to all my other socials if you want to follow. I'm going to try to start posting more educational thing to help people out. All these things like the mistakes I've made, and also the things I've experienced, the deals. We're going to talk about the deals we have, so that you can, people can learn from them. And so there's going to be a lot of content we'll be putting up there.
Very cool. Definitely check that out, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and put all of his social media handles and his website into the YouTube description. So go ahead and look in the description below to be able to connect with Dan. And if you have any questions for us, make sure you remember to leave them in the comments, and we'll get back to you so that you can get your answers that you need. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Dan. This has been the Pot of Gold podcast, where we talk about finances, wealth generation, and real estate investing. Thanks for tuning in.